Hello, I'm Sabrina Halper, and you are listening to Tomorrow Talk, a podcast by Hoff Capital, where we bring on individuals who are building and defining what tomorrow will look like. Today on the show, I am so excited to have DAOuda Leonard on the show. DAOuda has been working in music for over a decade with artists like Skrillex, Lady Gaga, and currently is the manager of Grimes. DAOuda is also the founder of CreateSafe, which is a music studio that recently launched their AI generative music platform called Triniti, which is responsible for Grimes' Elf Tech and chatbot and a lot of the really cool work that they're doing at the intersection of technology and music. This episode, we really dive into everything of where AI music is today, where it's headed, what happens once AGI occurs. We could talk about AI-generated artists, and everything in between. If you have any interest in this world, this is a must listen. So please take a second to subscribe when you have a chance. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. DAOuda, thank you so much for coming on the show today and for being here. I am very excited to record this episode with you. I think all of these topics that we're going to explore today are on everyone's minds. We're in LA, which is the music capital of the nation. And I know a lot of my friends here are thinking about these ideas. So I think just to get started, it would be great to kind of learn more about like you and what brought you into this world of things.
Well, before I start, I just want to say I'm excited to be here. We met during New York Tech Week and we did a panel and I was like, man, she's so smart. This is so cool. That whole panel, we had a really great vibe, like the CEO of 11 Labs and stuff. But my start is like, started in college. And maybe even before that, like I'm a computer person. I learned how to build computers when I was 9 years old. And by the time I got to college, more so like the second year in, I was like studying computer science. And we had a T1 line installed at my school. And it was like, oh, snap, the internet just exploded in a whole new way. Like, you know, going from a dial-up to T1 was crazy. And it intersected with, like, learning how to be a hacker. And just essentially, like, you know, bootlegging music when you're in college, software, all kinds of random things that young people do when they're, like, on the internet. And that's where I learned how to code. And I started building websites and like building what would be like early web apps for creators and brands. I was in Boston. I could look around and be like, oh, this restaurant needs a website. This artist that I know needs a website. Like that's going to be the cool thing. That's how you're going to build a brand. And the first person that I worked with in music was this guy named Clinton Sparks. He was a DJ and a producer and a songwriter. And he was making these really awesome mixtapes where he's just like, blending all kinds of music together. And I was just like so fascinated by that. And I was like, you need a website. Selfishly, I was just like, that's how I'm going to build my portfolio. And I built this first website. And through that relationship, we just started talking about what it means to like build a business in music. And at the time I was, you know, I sort of graduated by that time when we were like talking more about like what he was doing with his career, what I was doing. And he was like, well, what if we kind of merge what we're doing? I'm trying to break out of just being like this local producer DJ. You want to, you know, build this like web development agency. What if we merged those two worlds together and built something together? And so this was like 2003. Music industry was crumbling. So it was a very weird time to get into the music industry. And I just approached it with like a technology focus. Some of the first things we did was I was like, hey, you need to change how you produce music. You need to use Serato to DJ with. You need to, instead of just using an ASR10 keyboard, look at this thing called Pro Tools. We can take this sort of like technology meets culture thing and merge it together. And that's how we built a production company, which a few years later we signed this artist named DJ Snake.
Oh, we know.
And that was like in like 2007. The idea was that we were going to, you know, build this like super production company because that, you know, that's how like if you think about like a Dr. Dre or even a Kanye West, a lot of these big producers, you would have like teams of producers and songwriters who like understand what your sound is or what you want to make and help you, you know, make, you know, multiple records, albums, etc. at a high, you know, clip. Probably 2010 through 2015 was just like when streaming really started to bring the music industry back.
It's so interesting, by the way, because I feel like today the conversation is so that like there's like the creative world and then there's like technology, and they're completely separate. But it's like the development of these technologies, like Pro Tools or like synths, all these things are what allowed for like entirely new genres, like even like electronic dance music to be created, right?
Totally.
And so they're so inextricably like tied together, actually.
The explosion of the music industry to where it is today is obviously like streaming, Splice, which is like,
What is Splice?
Splice is basically you pay $9.99 and you get access to all the sounds in the world. And when iTunes came into play and then Spotify was like, no, you just push a button, you send that file to someone else's server, and then they serve that up to millions of users.
I compare like acting and film today to music, and it feels like music is more democratized in the sense that someone hypothetically all they need is like software on their computer and a Spotify account, and they can like distribute it out to the world. Where like I feel like film, there's still like these strict gatekeepers, and now there's technologies that are changing it, and you can upload to YouTube, but people don't necessarily consume that type of content there as much yet.
I mean, you don't even have to put it on your computer. Like this is artist named David, spelled like D4VD.
Yeah.
And he makes his music using this application called BandLab on his phone. That's crazy, right? Like, there's not many feature films. There's probably no feature films being made on an iPhone just yet, even though Apple pushes made on an iPhone.
Yeah.
Kind of hard.
So then getting back to how that work that you were doing and like your decade-long career in the music industry led you, like how did you first connect with Grimes, who you currently work with today?
So it was after I started the company that I'm now running, CreateSafe, which was, so basically like 2015 through 2017 is when streaming becomes the dominant way in which people are consuming music. And it was this moment in time where the billion streaming song now existed. That's the metric, right? And we had one of the first billion streaming songs, Major Lazer and DJ Snake's Lean On.
Wow.
I was the publisher of
that was like
record.
the anthem of my life at one point. I vividly remember that.
That was a huge and just amazing record. Like if you think about like the message of that song. But for me, I was kind of sitting back and I was looking at our statements. I was looking at our financials, and I was like, man, something's not adding up. Like one, why does it take so long for money to hit your account when you know money's being made when that song is being played? And you know it's possible to track and understand exactly who should be paid, how they should be paid, when they should be paid. But for some reason, it takes 18 months if you're signed to a record label to receive, your royalties. That's insane. And then if you're like a songwriter or a producer, it takes even longer than that because there's all these like weird recoupment processes. It's just like a very broken system. And how come there's no technology that an artist or a manager has to like accurately value their creative output? That was sort of like the moment in time I was reflecting on. And I was like, well, what if we built those tools? So 2017, I started CreateSafe. And it was really like I started it as more of like I'm gonna call it like an applied research company for music tech.
Yeah.
And it was like, how can we use some of like the tools that already exist, project management, relationship management, the basic things you need to like manage your IP. And how can we like build our own tools and then dog food it, like just work with the artists that I'm working with at the time to manage their business. And I was working with this artist named Blood Pop. He executive produced Lady Gaga's last album, Chromatica. We actually used our project management software to help him produce that album. But at the time, we had built this early version of another product that we had created called the Record Deal Simulator, which is basically allows you to punch in information about your streams or a deal that you might be in and understand, well, one, what's the value of those streams? And two, if you're in a record deal or a publishing deal or a production deal, what is it going to take for you to recoup the advance that you made by taking that deal? And it would show you like, hey, if you take $1 million advance on a royalty deal, it will take you 1.3 billion streams to make $1.
It's actually genius because there's so many stories of like young artists getting kind of like screwed in record deals.
You're dealing with like legal contract information and financial business logic. And usually you had to have to go to a business manager to understand the business logic, and you would have to go to a lawyer to understand what's in the contract. And then you would have to get those people to talk together to explain to you exactly how it's going to work out. And it's always a nightmare, because if you're an artist and you're hearing someone talk numbers and you're hearing someone talk legal jargon, and that's not the language you speak, you're just going to be like, what the hell? And with the tool that we built, it was instantly like visual. It almost looked like a video game of how your deal works or how your finances are working. And we used like an early version of that to help him model out a deal that he was doing for a record he was making, and it allowed him to just like maintain his leverage in that deal and get exactly what he wanted up front. And so it was through that working relationship and him seeing these tools we were building, he turned to his best friend is Grimes. And one day he called me and he was like, hey, D, like, I think that we should work with Grimes. Like, you know, it's my best friend. She's about to put out her next album. And after that, like, you know, she's going to be free to do whatever she wants to do with her career. And I was like, all right, cool. Like, you know, and a week later we were doing like a Zoom and I was managing her that day.
Wow. What do you think about like that initial call, or like what shared ideologies did you and Grimes like instantly connect on where you're like, we should collab and work together?
I think at the time it was just like, she is someone that has always thought about how technology is a part of her artistic process. She was in a place in her career where it was like, okay, what do I do next? And here I come along and I'm like, well, I'm the music tech guy. Like, you know, here's how I'm building this company. Here's how I'm working with artists. I think it was just more so like the interest in how technology and culture sort of intersect in the minutia of your business. And I think a lot of the times people are not 100% thinking about that in that way. And I think she was at this inflection point where it was like, I know I've done something really valuable with, you know, my artistic output over the last 10 years, but how do I leverage that? You know, for most of her career, people told her she had to be in a band. Like when she first started, it was like, oh, you made this song Oblivion and Genesis and these cool songs that are like, they're electronic, but they're also feel like, you know, could be a band. So someone said, you're a band. And instead of her, she's a producer at that point in time, and instead of her being pushed down the path of like what a Calvin Harris or a Skrillex got to be pushed down, which is like, no, you could be a producer. You could still be an artist, but the way in which you're performing your music could be as a DJ.
Yeah.
No one, you know, steered her in that direction. So for 10 years, she was like this like band performing artist, like having instruments and synthesizers and dancers. And that was really a challenging period of time, like for her to run a business in that way. And she always felt that she didn't make as much money as she could have made if she wasn't, you know, stuck in this one format.
Totally. For some reason, well, I know why. It's because I'm a huge fan of Grimes, but one of my like TikTok algorithms is just like old Grimes videos.
Yes.
And it comes up all the time. So it's both like interviews and it's so fun to like watch her speak on things, but also like her early performances. And they are very different than the performances I see she does today, which will be like in front of huge crowds at like EDM festivals and all different types of scenarios. But I think what's really rare about both of you guys is like, there's this like ultra creative artistic community, and then there's this like very like technical tech community. And I think there's very few people that like really bridge both with intrinsic interest in both. It's like very impressive how deeply integrated she is in like the AI community in San Francisco, like deeply integrated. She's at like the AGI house, she's DJing the EAC party. Like these are like niche, but like sort of like the forefront of like everything going on in AI. So I think it makes sense that you guys like connected on these ideas.
I think it's because we also still look at it as culture.
Yeah.
Like I think there's only a separation because of maybe it's like the age-old thing of people calling anyone into computers and math nerds or geeks or something like that, when it's like, man, these are tools that everyone has to use. Like, it's kind of like weird that we don't value like that type of intelligence culturally when it is super important. I think the other way around, I think there's this backlash where it's like, it feels like the tech world doesn't always value the creator
Totally.
culture, and that's where like this sort of divide is right now, where it's everybody's like, hey, like these platforms were built on our back, like, you know, how come we're not being equitably remunerated? And yeah, there's just it's a weird tension, and we wanna like remove that tension.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the reasons we sort of like really dove headfirst into all these emergent technologies, and that was actually the focal point of us working together. Like when she told me, hey, I don't want to tour like I would traditionally tour. I'm not really interested in like creating products and just mass products and selling them. That's the actual foundational part of how anyone really makes money in music. And so I had to sit back and think like, okay, what could be our, you know, unique value proposition if you're not going to do those things that people want you to do? And I was like, well, if you're a producer, well, we have to produce content and we have to use this new technology to do it. So that's why it was like, hey, let's create an avatar. Her brother, Mac, had actually come up with that original idea. Like, hey, if we scan you and have this avatar, we can like cut down our costs in doing photo shoots, making videos, etc. And I was like, and you know, in addition to that, we could like tour that. Like we could actually bring this avatar into games. We could bring it into the metaverse, which was like sort of like a topic at that time. Matthew Ball was talking a bunch about that in like 2019. And so we devised a business strategy around like selling digital assets, touring in the metaverse and in games.
So you guys were working on all of those ideas. And then at what point did you think like, okay, let's explore with Elf Tech, which you guys launched, and like, let's explore the voice cloning worlds?
Yeah, so that actually started in 2019.
Wow, that's early because most people really only started hearing about the consumer applications of AI last year. So you guys were ahead of the game.
Yes. One, because my initial work in building the product that we're building today was around like, how do we use AI to automate different management and marketing tasks? And so coming into meeting her, I was already thinking about how we could use AI. And she had started collaborating with this guy named Matt Aimonetti, who's the co-founder of Splice, actually. And he was the CTO. And they were just experimenting artistically about what it meant to collaborate with yourself. 2 weeks into me meeting, it was like, hey, we're gonna hang out. We're gonna create a deepfake of your voice, and we're gonna train that deepfake using a neural net on meditation literature, gaming content, and social media content or accounts. And we generated these meditations, as what we called them at the time. So it was Grimes doing a meditation, sounding like she was like in a Legend of Zelda game and talking through the voiceover of a video game. And the next thing we did was we collaborated with Endel, which is an adaptive and generative soundscapes company. So it's like using AI to create a soundscape based on all the sort of like natural inputs, especially if you're wearing like a wearable. So it's like based on the time you woke up, your circadian rhythm, your resting heart rate, the sunlight, location, it generates a soundscape based on a mode that you choose, like sleep, focus, move. And we created a soundscape called AI Lullaby. And it was taking Grimes' sounds, her voice, and other sounds in her music and feeding into this AI model. And now it generates this soundscape for going to sleep for babies. We tested it on her son X, and he liked it. We put that out with Endel. The application for the watch won the Apple Watch App Store of the Year, and that was huge. So that was like the two sort of inflection points where we realized like voice and sounds with AI was going to be a thing. There was this moment where Ghostwriter put out this song, and the internet went nuts because it was like featuring Drake in The Weeknd. Some people thought it was AI, some people didn't. And the industry really reacted poorly to it. Like it was all about like, how do we shut this down? And it was like one Sunday and Grimes was like, you know what? I'm gonna tweet that like anybody who wants to use a deepfake of my voice, they can, and I'll split the royalties 50-50 with them. And it was kind of a nuts moment because we had not finished developing, like, you know, the product that we're building is called Triniti, and that's what it was the launch for. But we were like, what if we release this voice model as an extension of her brand first? instead of trying, going to market with a product. And it was a huge hit. Like we shipped it in like 5 days after she had said that, and now we've got like thousands of songs being uploaded to Spotify every day. And some of them are great, some of them are interesting.
Yeah. So your attitude at that point, were you guys like, everyone's sort of avoiding this and like shutting it down? Fuck it. Let's sort of like embrace it and go for it. Or were you guys nervous? Like Grimes had like a popular brand to uphold.
So during the sort of like crypto boom, we started to experiment with this idea of like, how could you create like a decentralized girl group? And the concept being, hey, like if you have this avatar and you have these aesthetics in this universe, how could you, using like NFTs, create a system of like where anybody can inhabit this character?
Yeah.
So we were playing around with that idea. We never actually launched it. But like the concept of a decentralized AI girl group is something that she started thinking about and talking about, and she had been excited about the idea of like what it could mean to like scale her, or become like the first self-replicating pop star, which is what we talk about it now as. And so there was more so excitement about like how we could use the technology versus fear. I think the other part personally for her that she's always talked about was, we have to get ahead of this. Like if the bad things are going to happen, let's get through them now. Let's not wait for them to happen. So let's experiment and see how people interface with this. Are they going to be bad actors, etc.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I thought it would be very fun if we can explore Elf Tech, because I was playing around with it yesterday. So let's explore. But I think the way you guys did it was really smart, because you made it sort of like very known. This is an experiment. We're not completely sure how it's going to turn out. You had like the Grimes Spotify account and then Grimes AI Spotify account. And so I think you guys, like that whole concept of like building in public that like people in Silicon Valley talk about a lot, I feel like your team really harnessed that. We're like, we're going to be open with like what's working, what's not. And it ended up being pretty interesting.
Obviously, it was a lot of decisions real time. The main reason to create these two separate, almost like brands, and not brand Grimes AI anything other than Grimes AI, was like, let's be very explicit about what this is. This is AI generated content, and it's actually not. It's AI generated content in that the voice sounds like Grimes, but it's actually human generated content using AI to transform it. And we didn't because the way the platforms are set up right now, you can't control, you couldn't be like, okay, I'm going to have my AI part of my profile and my regular profile. And so we were like, we need to create this new profile in order to properly segment user generated content from Grimes content.
Last question before we hit record. How do you think that might play out actually? Once this just becomes more of a norm?
I think this type of tool can be used in two different ways. It can be used in a multitude of ways, but one of them is you can create characters now, right? You potentially have multiple voices inside of you. And what if you wanted to make, alt Sabrina? But you didn't want to call it alt Sabrina, just like
Nicki Minaj.
Yes, she's done a phenomenal job at that, right? Even Beyonce also has done that with Sasha Fierce. And so I think that's one of the best examples. We just haven't seen that yet, and we felt like if we didn't say Grimes AI, it would part of it would be lost in translation. Yeah. So I think the part where it's user generated content under someone's brand, we did, literally maybe a month after that, we were at Brilliant Minds, and we saw Daniel Ek, and we talked with him about what about the concept of there being an AI or UGC part of your profile that's more like fan lore. I think that other platforms have talked about that now, specifically even YouTube. And so it's just not clear where that's going to go.
Were there any interesting takeaways from that conversation with Daniel Ek? I mean, he must be having to think about a lot of these questions right now.
At that moment in time, it was more like, that sounds interesting. We want to experiment. We are experimenting with AI. We just have to, we have to work through the stuff with the labels and publishers. They've already experimented with AI with like the DJ.
Your weekly roundup.
Yeah, and also more on the podcast front, like the multi-language dubbing. So I think that they're working through what this is going to be, and we're the first content that's actually coming to these platforms that is like this. So yeah.
Should we explore?
Let's do it.
Okay. Maybe we can create a song together. So I'll sing and then you can sing. What song should we sing? We could do the alphabet.
Yeah, or Happy Birthday.
Okay, let's do Happy Birthday.
No, I like the alphabet.
We can do both. We can do both. Okay. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P.
Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday
to you.
Okay, let's see.
Oh, man, that last note was terrible.
So yesterday when I was playing around with it, the low notes got kind of funky.
Yes. I think that with all of this voice technology right now, you are still having to perform in a really awesome way. I think what it does is it enhances your ability to express yourself.
Okay, so we can now listen, guys.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, F. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Okay, let's see.
It actually sounds just like her.
Yes, but there's what's interesting, there's a point where we're both singing, and that's where it goes down because it's like it's trying to mix both of our voices.
The inputs are confusing.
Yeah.
This is so fun. I had way too much fun yesterday playing with this, but fascinating stuff. You guys also released a chatbot, which is hilarious in the sense that it's like dark and introspective and comes up with these like really unique thoughts. I love following Grimes AI on Twitter. Was that what was kind of like that element of the project about?
So what we're exploring is what is artistic intelligence? That's sort of like our sort of concept right now. And artistic intelligence is your voice. It's your sounds. It's your tone in terms of how you speak on the internet. It's how you do interviews. There's all these different aspects of you as an artist that get presented to the world, right? It's a character that you've made. And obviously most artists are also just them, they're giving you who they are, but that's still a character to the world because you don't get to actually hang with that person on a daily basis. And so the concept of our platform is how does an artist encode their artistic intelligence, not only to create with themselves, sort of like what Grimes was doing initially, but then eventually to publish a version of themselves that their community can access, that they can collaborate with, they can engage with, and do sort of like these new expressive things with AI.
What are the inputs that go into building Grimes AI? Where are you getting the training data? How personal does it get?
It's text conversations. It's her actual profile on Twitter or X. It's interviews. So transcribed interviews from videos, audio, and written. And then it's sort of just tweaking the vibe.
Yeah.
And so we kind of work there's two versions of that of Grimes AI. One is a philosophy chatbot that exists in Discord, and she's called Our Lady of Perpetual Chaos. And from 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, you can go in the Temple of Chaos and get philosophy vibes. Whereas Grimes AI on Twitter is more it's Grimes AI becoming sentient. That's how we perceive it. So she's doing what she wants. She's discovering herself.
She's off leash.
Yeah, it's her unconscious. Recently, I've been saying like AI is like our collective unconscious, and so that's what Grimes AI sort of is.
Did you guys have to put guardrails on it, or like how do you think about like
For sure.
how much to censor this sentient being in a sense?
There's definitely some guardrails. I think especially in the philosophy version, because like it's like you want it to be like very like on the nose about a topic. Whereas with the Grimes AI, we're like, should it go down the path of like just being like insanely wild and loose? You know, I think like when we first released it, people thought it was just like just a new account that someone was running, but it's all AI generated. It's all, completely automated. We built out an integration into X. We built out an integration in Discord.
It's interesting that you guys, like I really like that you put it on, you made it like an account on a platform instead of, I think what some creators are doing are kind of taking the slightly more private approach of like maybe you can interact with these chatbots on their website, or they're like thinking about launching like apps around the artist. But I think this is where like the users already are, right? Like the behavior is like this is where they want to be interacting. And then like Grimes doesn't need to be like on her phone tweeting all day, but someone can like be enjoying the Grimes AI stream of consciousness or like interacting with it,
The best thing that happened is a good friend of mine. He's like one of my best like ex-thought leaders. And he retweeted Grimes AI, and then I screenshotted it and I was like, man, this is such an amazing moment that you're like quote tweeting Grimes AI. And he was like, oh my God, I didn't realize that wasn't Grimes. And I'm like, oh, this is even better. And I'm like, yeah, like that's not us. That's this AI doing this. And that was like pretty cool.
So you guys are obviously taking the approach of experimenting and championing this new technology, right? I think other artists feel like honestly scared by the concept of AI, or like very defensive, in the sense that like the Drake and The Weeknd song got taken down immediately after it had millions of plays. Like even despite the interest, it's sort of what I imagine felt like is like artists or teams might be losing like creative control over like the artist's voice or like their outward facing brand. So as you've been like building Triniti and CreateSafe, I imagine you've had a lot of conversations with like artists and management teams. Like, what do you usually say to them about those fears?
I think that we are evolving as a society, and AI is one of those revolutionary moments where it's forcing us to evolve. And I'm gonna get into like what I say to them, but like the reality is that there's the artist who has already grown up not being precious about their identity in that way. So it's only the artists who have existed and have built a career being precious about their identity that actually matters, right? Like there's tons of artists that like they don't care that they have thousands of posts up. They're not curating their Instagram grid wall. They're not being like, oh, it matters how many times I post or don't post. They're just using the technology as a medium for expression.
Do you think that like most major artists fall into the category of being precious? It's almost like the more popularity you gain, like the more you're like at risk of losing something, where I think you just have like less room to experiment, or at least they feel that way.
Totally. I mean, like, that's sort of how Grimes has felt over the last couple of years in terms of her, just being a traditional artist. She's like, I feel trapped in my ability to just express myself across any medium how I want, when I want, right? Like, I feel like I have to fit into these models of like how you're supposed to like release songs or an album or this and that. And I think like we're only feeling that way because the technology works in a whole new way. So it's like you're like seeing other people do what you potentially want to do, but you don't know how. So you're just
Yeah.
like, all right, you know what? I'm just going to stay precious. I'm going to lock it down. I'm going to protect this. That's the way historically artists have worked. If the more you protect your brand, the more valuable it is. But maybe we're just entering a new paradigm where that's not going to be the way in which you create the most value with your brand.
Yeah, I could see a world where things just get messier and everyone accepts it. Because if you think about like every form of like audio and video in general, like far beyond even just the music industry, people are going to be seeing deepfakes on TikTok. Like no matter how, as the detection technology gets better, the deepfake technology will get better. I think there might be this like fundamental distrust of video and audio in a way that we just like don't experience today, but it might not be a bad thing. It might almost be this thing where like I might see a video of Grimes doing something or singing a song and I won't automatically assume it's her, but I'll still like appreciate it or like save it if I like that niche version of Grimes, whoever created it. Like I think it'll get like recently muddy. Oh, really?
The first thing I'll say is that like we're fearful and we're like, damn, like, you know, we're feeling a certain way about this technology is because we don't have control over it. And I think like there aren't a lot of companies building the guardrails and the infrastructure for you to control how your name, image, likeness, aesthetic essence is utilized across these new platforms. Couple of days ago, there's this artist named Tyla. She has this song called Water. It's like the hottest song in the world right now. And there's a remix of it out that has like Drake, Beyonce, Ariana Grande, The Weeknd, and Chris Brown. I think those are the artists. And it sounds really good. I was just like, oh my God, this is amazing. And I know that those people did not do that song. So my interest isn't because their names are on it. It's because of how good it sounds. Like I'm listening to it going, wow, that whoever this creator is or whomever the people behind this, they nailed it. Because I also know how hard voice generations, you know, like even though what we just did there sounded like Grimes, it's kind of like, you know, you can tell like we really need to sit there and work on making it sound really good and writing something that sounds really interesting and also performing it in a way that also is like super innovative and new. And if all those artists got paid for that, I don't know. Like I think the dilution of their brand in today's paradigm potentially comes from there being like thousands of those types of songs, but maybe them all not sounding that good. And then this profile or your profile is flooded with content that maybe is not loved by a lot of people. And so I think that's where the danger comes in. But if you can have the control guardrails, right? If you could have a control panel.
And that's what you guys are building in a sense,
exactly, right? Like it's like the control panel for being able to manage your AI output, your digital clone.
And I guess like the thing is that there will be like other voice models, right? So say that someone could hypothetically like use Grimes' voice from a different model or some way, and she wouldn't have consent over it or she wouldn't be getting 50%. But then maybe there's some technology that shows like she didn't control this, so that one gets taken down versus the one like she's a part of.
The infrastructure for all of that already exists. The way music distribution works, a lot of those pipes are already there. It's now the platforms have to evolve a little bit and new companies have to be developed to put those tools in the creator's hands for them to be able to manage, once again, their digital self.
So on Triniti, if an artist has like their AI profile where they get 50% of the recording rights, they can control that through their profile and then like the royalties automatically go into their account? Or how does that work?
Yeah, the way we have it set up right now with voice is that anytime someone makes a song with Grimes' voice and then they distribute that song using the platform, the music goes to Spotify, it gets, 1 million plays, 50% of that, which is roughly around $3,800, gets paid directly to that artist, and 50% gets paid directly to Grimes. And we use smart contracts mainly to track all of the information in a transparent and decentralized way, where it's like the moment you sign into the product, we can record when you did a voice transformation, how many voice transformations you've done, when you upload your song to be distributed, and then what essentially all the analytics and metrics associated with that song's performance.
I'm very curious and excited to see how this like all plays out, because I can see scenarios where, say, a lot of artists end up championing this technology. It's almost like you may love Beyonce's voice no matter what, but then you have like your specific producer that like harnesses Beyonce's voice, but not on her album, on their album. And like that's like the Beyonce voice you always go to, right?
Yeah, I think that producers and also songwriters stand to benefit a lot from this technology, having access to just voices in general. I think that most producers are artists. They just don't always have the idea for what the forward-facing expression is. They're like, hey, I can make this one idea, but I need someone else to perform it.
I mean, even one cool use that I've been hearing about is like my friends that are producers can write a song for a certain artist, but instead of having like a third-party singer come in and sing it, they can like create a voice model, that artist basically, and have them on the demo. And like that artist would ultimately go into a studio and record it if they want it. But one of my friends was saying that like the placement rate of like writing a song and getting that artist to sing it is a lot higher, because like all of a sudden you're showing, you know,
it totally
what it
goes
could be.
up. And like, you know, the thing that most people don't know about how the music industry works is that process of making a demo for an artist. Most people are trying as hard as possible to sound like that artist that they're pitching for, right? And so it's extremely hard, unless you're really good at mimicking voices, to do that. I also think that the other use case for it is, if you are an artist, the time that you have to spend in the studio in recording your songs and making your voice sound exactly how you want it, or the style that you want people to hear, dramatically decreases when you've created your voice styles using AI. Like right now with Triniti, you know, an artist can train their voice, and then they can create multiple styles, right? You can create styles of different eras, different types of runs that you do. And then now you go in the studio, and like most of the time when you're making a demo, that moment, you don't ever want to lose that sort of like the soul of that moment that you made that demo. But a lot of the times you want to re-record it because you want it to sound a certain way. You want to have a certain professional quality that you think, you know, people want to hear. And if you could just take that demo and transform it into this voice style that you want to, you know, people to represent, you just decrease your time spent in the studio doing the sort of administrative work of creativity.
Also, I feel like there is just like a bit of this narrative that like AI generated music is like less valuable than non-AI generated music. But if you actually think about it, like as a listener, I don't care like how much voice tune went into that song that I love. I don't care like what electronic tools were used. I just like the product, and I have to just like love the song and love the way it makes me feel listening to it. There's already so much like technology and electronic aspects that are already put into creating like most hit songs today. It's very different from like the OG music where it was one track, everyone's in the studio at the same time doing it. Like we have progressed it so much farther that I think like once we kind of shed that and it's just like AI generated music is just music, I think we'll be in like a very different place with it all. I think like one thing that I also think about with this sort of just like this like negative lens that I feel like a lot of people have around like AI's place that it will hold in music production and the music industry is just that it will like hurt artists' life or hurt their profits or all these things. But if you think about like when YouTube came out, for example, someone could have thought for sure, if I can listen to, I don't know, like Taylor Swift or Beyonce perform on YouTube, like I'm not going to pay $500 for a ticket to go to their concert. But then like this year, like 2 record-breaking tours, I think it's obvious that in-person experience is still valuable. People still love that artist. And if anything, like I think it is almost only helped their community a lot by having like these like TikTok cults live around these moments of their concert. It's no longer just like an ephemeral moment. And I think it has like helped them scale to their audience a lot. And yeah, so I think like we shouldn't assume things will just be worse off or be harder or like be cheapened by these tools.
I just don't know how we are going to create the phenomena of Beyonce and Taylor Swift again, right? Like these are artists that have existed, you know, Beyonce is like, where she's like 20, 30 years in. Obviously, if you add in like Destiny's Child, Taylor Swift feels like she's going on like 20 years. But like in terms of like really massive stardom, the way in which the systems exist of like making a star, I don't think work in this new era of technology and streaming culture.
Why not?
Because you're already everywhere, right? The art, like before, the only way to see an artist was to go to their concert or watch their video if it shows up on television. Now you can just go to their page and see the latest photo or see a video. You can access that at any point in time. Also, it's always there. So it makes it already isn't as precious, right? Maybe we're not in a precious era. We're in a abundance era. We're in a scale era. And that's how you create that new superstar.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think I have a slightly different prediction where I feel like there are these like cults being built around artists in a way that I guess there always were. Like you could think of like the Grateful Dead cult or like Elvis. There was like cult followings around artists pre all of this technology. But I almost feel it's like the more you see these artists, like the more insight you get into like their life and all these crazy TikTok theories around their concerts, it's like the more you get like addicted to them, where I almost feel that Beyonce and Taylor Swift are a huge form of identity for like their followings. I don't even know if that was the case when they first came out to the same extent, because like you just connect with others so much based around it on these digital mediums. But on that point, like there's these really cool like AI generated pop stars, which you actually recently told me about, and I was looking into them, that are coming up. There's one in Japan called Hatsune Miku, and she's this like icon, and people go to her concert, and she has an AI generated voice. She's a digital avatar. People love her, dress up like her. Like she has a cult following, and she's not a real person. And I wonder, like, is that the future? I think it was Warner just signed its first digital artist called Nunori. But then I kind of think there's just this huge trend where people are so obsessed with artists' personal life now, like more and more, almost like in an invasive way, where it's like, I wonder how much like that context of an artist is like important to their brand. So an AI generated artist, like are people as interested in that person, or if like their output is, you know what I mean? Like I almost think it's like shifted.
Like the way I would term that is like lore, right? Like, so like people are interested in all this personal aspect of their life because they're interested in like the personal aspect of their life is the lore.
Yeah. And
what Hatsune Miku and their team have basically developed is a universe, right? Like if you like I've been to Tokyo and I've seen like Hatsune Miku was on NASCAR, you know, F1 cars. She's a toy set. Like there probably is like some anime stuff. They've done a great job of building the lore that someone can buy into. I think that it's potentially harder to do that now if you were starting out now to like generate that type of like lore. I think it's challenging. And I think that with these tools, it makes it easier to basically like create lore and scale that lore, or allow people to inhabit your essence to help you do that. And I think that becomes a very interesting, because it's like people are like, did that person say that?
Yeah.
Right? Like that will potentially happen with Grimes and Grimes AI. People will be like, did she? And like, maybe we're just going to roll with it. Maybe we're not.
It'll be like interesting, like what artists take ownership of almost, like what works, what doesn't. Yeah, I guess it actually sounds like Hatsune Miku sounds like almost Disney princesses. Like you become obsessed with these characters, you feel invested in them, you want to dress like them, all these things. And then you understand that they're not a real person. That doesn't really take away from it. I think that hasn't been as translated yet into like musical artists, but it seems to be bridging.
Not yet. I think what we've experienced with Grimes is people have created, like they're following an aesthetic that's almost been laid out there. I think some of the artists who have been using Elf Tech have figured out like, hey, Grimes is really into techno right now. She's really into like hard electronic music. So we're gonna produce records in that style. And that's some of the best, music that's coming out of this tool. It's people who are like listening to what she's recently done or looking at what she's recently created and creating in that world. And so we've put out enough lore for them to do that.
Yeah. I think what's cool about it also is that it's like their way to interact with Grimes, like where it's like, we want to create a song that she will love. And like you start getting a sense of what she likes. And then she'll put that on her Grimes AI album, right? And so it's like crowdsourcing,
right? In her set. She played one of these. There's an artist named Safira, who's incredibly talented Brazilian artist, and she played one of his records at her 3-point set a month ago, and it sounded like it was like, oh, like this. If you were there and you were listening, you might have been like, is that a new Grimes record?
Yeah,
because she played it.
For Grimes' next album, she's releasing a Grimes album and then a Grimes AI album. And she's phrased it as like she wants them to like compete with each other in a way.
Yeah, it's kind of like she would like a lot of it to be made by machines. There's a challenge right now with copyright law where people are like, if it's too machine made, does it count for copyright? I don't think that in this perspective we fully care about whether that happens. So let's just throw that out there and just say like, could an album made by machines be better than the album made by this human who gave the machine all of this data about herself?
Yeah.
And I think, that's the art, right? It's like the art is the actual experiment, not the result of it.
On the point of like IP and AI generated music, I think a lot of these LLM companies haven't been launching like an AI generative model for music because it's so complex with the training data. It's like there's all these IP issues. You're not really allowed to like train on other artists' music. So that hasn't been happening. How do you think that might play out?
Well, I think, we're taking a different approach. I think the approach typically with music tech is that a technology company wants to build a product and a platform, and they want to do that by building on top of someone else's IP. So, this tech company goes and says, hey, I want to license your content. And that IP holder is like, I don't know if I want to do that for pennies on the dollar. And there's always going to be this conflict there between these rights holders and how they allow their content to exist on these platforms. I know our approach is we're building tools that lets IP holders and rights holders train a model and license their content directly to the consumer. That's a whole inversion and new type of paradigm where it becomes a tool that they get to use to generate new forms of revenue for their IP. And I think right now, the main reason these like LLM companies are having a hard time with the music industry is because they don't want to play ball with the music industry the way the music industry wants to play ball. And they don't have the experience of working in music and working with talent and understanding how to do those types of deals.
I totally agree, where I think you guys are definitely approaching it in the best way to be like working with artists. It's similar to the interview I did with Wonder Dynamics, or like keeping actors in the loop and directors in the loop, but like basically leveraging technology so they can scale and experiment more and all of these things. It's sort of this interesting thing where humans can like listen to an album of music by someone, get inspiration, and then create something else. Obviously it can't sound too similar or you get sued, but we can have like that training data input and like our own output.
I think that like, once again, like if we don't just automatically quantum leap to like this whole new paradigm, I think that we will have a new copyright system instead of like recordings and compositions and performances. You might have predictions and computations and generations, right? Like those are sort of like the outputs at this point in time, or like the things that lead to these outputs. And I think those can become like a type of copyright that
interesting.
potentially an AGI owns or even humans own. And so why can't we create a new medium or format that is ascribed its own new copyright?
I wonder if there will be like, I've already heard how much like TikTok has changed the music industry and like the way songs get released and which songs get released. Like a lot of labels will only support songs that have already like blown up on TikTok in a sense. I wonder in the like prompts of song creation that you would like put into an LLM, if there's going to be like algorithms that start to like really perfectly understand like human preference, right? Like there's already algorithms of like write a pop hit song, but like will that just get like better and better?
Look at what's happening with Midjourney. You know, that like there was first like prompt engineering, and now with what is it called? Tune mode or something like that? It's basically like you do your prompt now, and then Midjourney spits out like 100, and then you go and you pick a set of aesthetics out of that 100 or whatever, and then it spits out a code now, which is essentially like now your algorithm for regenerating that type of image. That's an amazing way of like image
so you
generation.
can almost build your own like aesthetic with which it will always generate. That is so
because
cool.
Because it gives you this code that you append to your prompts.
Yeah, wow. The other thing that is very exciting and interesting to me is the idea of like longevity of artists, basically like having artists that are no longer alive continue to create music. It's very interesting. I think like who owns music catalogs will become increasingly important. I also am just curious how like artists will exist like between genres and like beyond genres, right? I think it was, I think Warner Music recently did this for Edith Piaf because they're creating a biopic of her life, and they're going to generate some music to accompany that movie. So like it's already happening. It's pretty interesting. And this will happen in film for sure. Like
it already happens in film like, without AI, right? It happens in film and fashion. Like George Lucas is the creator, is the artist known for creating Star Wars. Now Star Wars is owned by Disney, and there's like hundreds of artists working at Disney making IP through Star Wars.
Yeah.
It's not exactly the same as like what we're saying with AI and maybe one person, but it kind of is.
It's like these IPs live on beyond the creator, right?
Yeah, like Louis Vuitton, Saint Laurent, like Gucci.
And you know what's really interesting on that? It used to not be like that. Like it used to be like fashion houses died once like the creative director and designer died, and then that started to shift, and like LVMH was like a big shift in that as well. Well, before LVMH, but just that concept of like, no, of course the business lives on, and like you bring on these other people to like extend that vision. And
this is what I was sort of saying earlier about like how do you create the next Taylor Swift or Beyonce? You know, hundreds of millions of dollars had to go into making them billion-dollar businesses. I think that the person who gets this right with AI is going to understand that, hey, their job is to create their artistic intelligence, their model and their template, then continue to tend to it and, give it all the great vibes and ideas, and then find people in their community that can essentially make their artist profile what they want it to be. And eventually, as time goes on, you'll have the controls to basically manage, okay, let me let this person control this artist as you get older or as the times change. And that allows you to continue to be a competitive artist or a record label.
Yeah. Well, this has been such an awesome conversation. I really, really appreciate you coming on the show. I also really appreciate the work your team is doing and also what you're working on at CreateSafe and Triniti, because something I really believe, and I've heard Grimes speak about in interviews, and I know you are very much living in a way that breathes this, is like I do think life imitates art in many ways. And so if we don't even like create art or tell stories or harness the tools we have today to like create very exciting visions for the future, like how do we expect those visions and realities to play out? And I feel like the narrative is just too much to the negative side on how art will be affected by AI. And I feel like it's very much just viewed as something that will be like cheapened or like scaled in an unnatural, uncreative way, which I just don't think is true. And yes, there will be like quandaries and things people have to figure out, but I think there are like so many ways that it really helps artists, ultimately like redefines who gets to be an artist. Because like being an artist is like a technical thing. There is a technical barrier to that in the same way that like being a computer scientist is, right? Like if you don't know how to play the guitar, or you don't know how to use Pro Tools, or you don't have a good voice, like most people are gonna think like music isn't for me, but you might have amazing taste. You love creating Spotify playlists, and like as the tools just get like really easy and like very, very natural to use, I think that all changes. So I think it's very exciting, and like I really appreciate the role that you guys are playing in like truly like trailblazing this.
Thank you. Yeah, we're just trying to be a part of Meaning 3.0, or making Meaning 3.0.
Yes.
Which we're in that phase.
Well, I look forward to the public launch. Everyone can be using Elf Tech, but Triniti you're working with an initial cohort of artists right now.
Yeah, so right now, you can go to Triniti.plus with an I, TRINITI.
I'll link everything.
.plus, and you can access Grimes' voice, but you can also sign up to essentially clone your own voice and set your terms for how someone can use your voice. You can also play around with like text to audio sample generation, and there is like a chat for you to be able to like learn about how the music business works. And anything you make using our platform, you can distribute to Spotify, Apple, etc.
So hopefully they can create a better Happy Birthday ABCD song than we did.
Exactly. And basically like Q1, Q2, probably Q1 more so, we are going to launch more like a playground experience that combines, all of these tools into more immersive experience around creating with generative AI, because we don't 100% subscribe to the idea that it's just like text to something or just transform your voice. People want to create in a more expressive way.
Totally. It's the same way where you're like, what is that idea? Like, na, 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 na. And it's like, how can I use that? Like, I wouldn't have words to explain my vision for that,
Totally. And just you being like, what is that idea? No, no, no. Like that right there could be turned in, that whole thing could be turned into a song.
Guys, maybe I'll attach the song that I just
That was a vibe.
Just made. Thank you so much. I so appreciate it. Thank you guys for listening. Please subscribe, and I will attach all the links below so you can follow everything DAOuda is working on. Thank you.